Good morning, buenos dias. Today we're going to talk about important things you need to know about Spanish English translation. We get a lot of questions on that. Can I use the general Spanish or do I need to use a particular Spanish? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you have questions, you have comments, go ahead and put them in the chats next to me. I'll try to answer them as we go along. I'm really looking forward to doing this and talking about it. So, first off, I'm Wendy Pease from Rapport International. I absolutely love everything about languages and cultures, and I'm the president and CEO of Rapport International, where we connect you with anyone around the world, no matter the language. So let's talk about Spanish English translation. First off, did you know that Spanish is spoken by close to 600 million people around the world? And so about 500 million are native speakers. So you've got a lot of people who speak it as a second language. And it's the second most learned language in the world. It's the official language of more than 20 countries. And, just on the side, does anybody know what the official language is of the United States? I'll tell you at the end of that. Since we're talking about Spanish, maybe that gives you a hint, maybe it doesn't. So, official language of the United States, if we have one or many, or what do you think it is? So, in addition to being the official language of 20 countries, it's also spoken in numerous other countries. Spanish is the second most studied language in the world. And I mentioned that there's about 21 million students of Spanish as a foreign language. In the United States alone, there's 45 million Spanish speaking people who live here. And the United States has the second largest Spanish speaking population in the world. Mexico is the first, and the United States is second. So if you market in the United States and you know that you've got Spanish speakers around you, it's worth translating a little bit of your materials to attract and engage people so they become customers and feel welcome doing business with you. The United States is expected to become the largest Spanish-speaking market by the year 2050, looking at the census and the demographics that are coming out. Okay, so the differences between the Spanish, we get asked that a lot. Can I use one Spanish or should I go global? First, let's talk about a little bit about the differences, and then we'll talk about when you can use a globalized Spanish. So you've got Caribbean Spanish. It's a mixture of European, Central American Spanish, along with some English can be mixed in there, and you might have some Creole in there. Then you've got the Mexican and Central American Spanish, where it's more similar because the countries are close, but each country is going to have its own slang, its own country references. And I can compare it to the United States. If you look at how New England speaks, I mean, here in Massachusetts, we use the word wicked and we call water fountains bubblers. In the South, they use y'all, and that's not something you'd hear in the Northeast unless it's somebody who is from the South. And you'd never hear y'all, that's wicked funny or something like that. It just sounds odd. So that's what you're running into in Mexican and Central American Spanish is everybody's going to understand each other, but there's going to be slight differences. And I also know that I learned Spanish in first and second grade in Mexico and then took it through school. So to me, Costa Rican Spanish, Colombian Spanish, Mexican Spanish is all very clear to me. But when you start talking Argentinian Spanish, I have a much harder time understanding because it's spoken much faster. And so it's harder for me to follow. And then a third type of Spanish you have is the European Spanish. It's a broad term that's meant for the Spanish that's spoken in Spain and the Spanish islands. People refer to it as European Spanish, continental Spanish, Spain Spanish. And there are also different kinds of Spanish spoken in Spain. Now, Catalan is, to me, a very different language because I can't understand it at all. And if you watch social media, within the couple of weeks, we're going to be posting something where I interviewed my dive master in Costa Rica because he was in Spain. He grew up in Catalan, and he says a sentence in Catalan and Spanish. So it gives you a clear understanding of how different they are. Okay. So when you're thinking about translation, you have to think about The first question after what language is where is it going to be used? So if you're going to use Spanish in the United States, you're going to want to have somebody that understands the American system, particularly if it's in legal, healthcare, insurance, because there's terms that are going to come up there that the person needs to understand how to translate to get that meaning across, because particularly those topics across the world are going to be very different. If you're targeting a specific country, it may be worth using somebody from that country, but it may not be necessary depending what you're translating. I like to give the example of if you're translating materials for consumer products, oftentimes it's better to localize, which means really use somebody from that area. So they're using the slang, they get the nuances. But it's not as black and white as if it's a consumer product versus a B2B or industrial product, because some consumer products, like there's these cool raincoats that you can use for biking. So they go back over the seat so you don't get that ugly black splash up your back. Now that can be biking for everywhere. Everybody's going to understand why you'd use that kind of raincoat. Whereas if you're talking about a soccer or football, you're going to want to have very local references on there. When you get into industrial products, it's much more important to have somebody who understands the actual technical use. It's more important to use visuals and graphics and references to that local country because people have very strong feelings about their soccer or football team. Another thing to understand is that there's fewer words in Spanish. There's about 90,000 words, and the English dictionary has about 600,000 words in it. So right there, I think Spanish would be much easier to learn than English because there are fewer words. And so that means that translations are going to be longer because instead of using one word, you may have to use multiple words to get the meaning across. So every time we're looking at doing a translation that includes a layout or a website, we're looking for at least a 20% additional white space or expansion space because of the additional number of words it can take to do the translation. And that's pretty standard across all languages, and I'll get into that in other languages. And then it's good to understand that nouns are gendered. So a table is la mesa. So that's a feminine gender, whereas el teléfono is male. And that can change depending on the speaker, the noun, and the plural, and how they agree, and how the verbs and adjectives fit in there. So El jefe is masculine, but if you've got a woman boss, that is going to change to la jefa. So all these things are really important to understand that's going to happen in Spanish. All right, so what are some of the most common words? You've got hola, that means hello. You've got amor, that means love. You've got gracias, which means thank you, and felicidades, which means happiness. Now, I just got back from Costa Rica. This is why I'm doing the Spanish translation. And there are some words that you just can't capture with one translation, or we don't have a word for it. So we need to add it into English. The Costa Rican one that I love is pura vida. And that means hello, it means goodbye, it means have a good day, it means thank you, it means, oh, this is exciting. It's just one of those things that people say, particularly if they're local to another local. So that's a good one that doesn't have a pure translation. If you try to translate it literally, it means like the pure life, which means like the good life. And it certainly is the good life down there. It's a fabulous country if you haven't been. All right, how about a couple of other words that don't have a direct translation? Vergüenza ajena is, I think this is a really interesting one. It means feeling embarrassed or shameful for somebody, even if he or she doesn't feel embarrassed for him or herself. So that I've certainly had that feeling before, not too much because I usually get a chuckle and share the laugh if the person isn't embarrassed, but it has a good meaning. And then empalagar means to be too sweet. And it's so sweet, it can make you sick. So it can be like, I'm eating this chocolate dessert, which is so wonderful, but it's so sweet, it's going to make me sick. Or it could be more not in the literal sense, but like, oh, that couple does too much kissing and affection. It makes me sick. So we don't have an exact translation for that. And that kissing and affection I got from, just looking for examples on the web of what I could find. So, go ahead and kiss and show affection. At this point, it doesn't make me sick. If you put it into Google Translate, there's no translation that comes out. Another one that I love is pica. It means hot, spicy. So when my kids were young, instead of telling them something was hot, like the salsa we were eating was hot, I'd say it's pica. And it was because saying hot, I had to describe whether it was temperature or spice. And pica just gets that across. So one of my kids came home from school one day and said, "Hey, Mom, did you know that pica is really a word in Spanish?" And I had to chuckle because I did, but there was no other English word that made sense. So this is kind of some of the differences or some of the things you need to know about Spanish and English translation. You want to know when you need a Spanish translation, where it's going to be used. Does it have to be particular to the country? Have you left enough space for it? Does the person have the expertise in the area that you're doing the translation? And please don't depend on any automated or machine translation if you have something that could affect your revenues or your bottom line, because using the automated translation is not going to pick up on some of these words. All right, so I said I'd end with the official language of the United States. I was talking about Spanish. You might think that might be one, but no, it's not. And English is not the official language of the United States either. In the United States, we have no official languages. We are accepting of all languages. So go out and learn some new words today and enjoy it. So I don't see any comments now, but I'd love your comments. I'd love if I forgot anything that you think that would be helpful, let me know. It is always my pleasure to share any information that I've learned along the way. So have a great day, and we'll see you next Friday, 10 o'clock East Coast time. That would be 7 o'clock Pacific time and early afternoon on European time. We're here every week to give you a little bit of information about language translation. Thanks. You take care. Adios, amigos.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, or you can keep watching. And don't miss out on new posts by subscribing to our channel. And if you want to talk to Rapport International about all your translation and interpretation needs, or about growing your business into new markets, use the link below for a free 30-minute consultation.